Who was Napoleon Bonaparte, you know? The guy with the big hat and the even bigger ego. Well, let's find out. Napoleon Bonaparte was a French military leader and emperor who conquered much of Europe in the early 19th century. He was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, which at that time was under the control of the Republic of Pisa. But don't get too excited, Pisa isn't in Venice, it's in Italy. Anyway, young Napoleon showed an aptitude for military strategy from an early age, which was lucky because that's what his family had been doing for the past 100 years. They were military. It was in their blood. He attended military school in France, and by the time he was 24, he was a captain in the artillery. But then the French Revolution happened and Napoleon got all fired up about it. So much so that he staged a coup and became the first consul of France. This made him the most powerful man in France, but also the most hated. So he crowned himself emperor in 1804, but that didn't make him any more popular. In fact, it did the opposite. People hated him even more, but Napoleon didn't care because he was too busy making plans to invade every other country in Europe, and I mean every country. He fought against the Austrians, the Russians, the British, the Dutch, the Swiss, the Ottomans and the Portuguese, and he conquered most of them. I mean, just take a look at this map. At one point, Napoleon controlled most of Western Europe. The only countries that remained independent were Sweden, Spain, Portugal and Italy. Well, technically Italy wasn't a country at that point, it was just a bunch of small states. But you know what I mean. But despite all his military success, Napoleon was never able to conquer Russia. And it wasn't because the Russians were better fighters or had stronger defenses. It was because they kept playing this really annoying game of war where they pretended to be losing, so Napoleon would waste his resources chasing them around. And then when he got tired, they would come back and kick his butt. It happened 3 times. And after the 3rd time, Napoleon was like, screw this, I'm going home. And that's when his problems began. Because while he was conquering Europe, the British had been conquering India. And by the time he came back to France, they had taken most of it. So Napoleon did what any reasonable person would do. He built a massive navy and set sail for India to teach those Brits a lesson. But before he could get there, his ships were blown up by some British dude named Horatio Nelson at a battle called Trafalgar. After that, Napoleon decided to stick to land and try to conquer Africa, but that didn't work out either. And eventually he was kicked out of France and died in exile on the island of St. Helena in 1821. But his legacy lived on in the countless statues, paintings and songs that were made about him. Not to mention he's the reason why lawyers exist today. Yeah, seriously. Before Napoleon, lawyers were basically non-existent. Everyone just kind of figured out how to read and write and did their own legal research. But then Napoleon came along and said, I'm going to make things a little more complicated around here, and that's why we have lawyers today. So thanks, Napoleon. Now check out the real reason why the French Revolution happened, or watch this video instead.